Welcome to the first segment of Unnatural Selection, where science isn't just for the scientists. My name is Riley Gardner. I am a human biology student researcher at the University of Glasgow, and today I'm joined by my good friend Kerr. Hi, Kerr.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
Today we're going to talk a bit about the gut-brain axis and debunk some current research on binge drinking and Crohn's disease. So, why did you want to come on today?
Well, I might actually learn something about my health, which doctors have as yet not bothered to really tell me.
Yes, and for legal reasons, I am not a doctor. What do you actually know about the gut-brain axis then?
It's essentially nothing, to be honest, other than, like I say, what I've got from doctors, which is just that there is a connection between what's going on in your head and what your gut will do.
Yeah, we'll actually talk a bit about that later as well and kind of the connection to inflammatory conditions like Crohn's. But just for kind of continuity, the gut-brain axis is actually the communication between, as you said, between the central nervous system and your enteric nervous system, which the enteric nervous system is responsible for controlling your gastrointestinal system. So kind of all the movements of it, like the churning movements. And the way that we figured this out was actually really cool. It was this guy named Joseph Lister in the 19th century who actually worked at the University of Glasgow and the University of Edinburgh at different points as a surgeon. But he actually disconnected all of the nerves from a section of bowel from the spine and found that the gastrointestinal system was still able to contract. So it just shows that your stomach and your intestines, they're all able to actually control themselves completely independently of the central nervous system, which is interesting because my assumption of the gut brain axis was that it was all your head controlling what happens in your intestines, but the communication is actually bidirectional. So changes in your microbiota and changes in your gastrointestinal system can affect your brain as well. So it's really interesting anyway. So it's kind of a feedback between the two. I thought that was really quite cool. But with that considered, right, I sent you a couple papers. Did you read them? It's okay if not.
I read the abstracts
Yeah,
and
right.
sort of became very confused by what should be the sort of the clearest part of the paper, so I didn't venture too much further.
Yeah, that was actually my next question was, I mean, did you find them readable? Were you able to kind of understand the content
The
there?
the one relating, uh, or at least to me, sounded like it was relating more directly to binge drinking. I found was much clearer in its language that was used,
Right,
so I could at least sort of I could at least get the sort of the intention behind it,
right.
even if I didn't understand all of the content. But the other one was completely unintelligible to me.
Yeah. And would you say that you kind of read papers like that often, or like BBC articles maybe about kind of?
I read quite a lot of sort of scientific news,
Mhm.
things that are published for a popular audience, but
Yeah.
I have read quite a lot of physics papers in the
Okay.
past that are more similar to
Right.
more similar to what you sent me there,
Yeah.
which so but obviously it's a totally different.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm personally like I find with a lot of these papers, I mean, even just in the abstract, I usually have to read it like once, maybe twice, sometimes even more than that, just to kind of get the general gist on it. But that's why I kind of wanted to talk about it because I think it just it's good to kind of talk it through because I think it makes a lot of the content make more sense, which is what I do with my study partners as well a lot. But for our first study, it was published in 2023, and the general hypothesis was that the gut brain axis regulates social cognition and craving in young binge drinkers. And my first note about this study was the exclusion criteria. You know what exclusion criteria is, yeah?
Broadly, yeah.
Just like reasons why they wouldn't include a participant in a study. And the three major ones that stood out to me was frequent tobacco smokers, cannabis users, and a family history of alcoholism. And listen, I'm not going to point any fingers, but I feel like they may have just eliminated a decent two-thirds of the people that they could have potentially used in the study.
Yeah, I'd say through both my personal life and my work, that would eliminate most young binge
Yeah, that was
drinkers.
my thinking, I mean, right off the bat, which I understand they need to kinda control for certain factors, but I think just in regards to taking studies like this and making it available to the public and making it ones in which people can actually relate to the results of it gets difficult when you're kind of limiting those factors because I think it's more unusual, especially in young people, to find somebody that binge drinks that doesn't partake in any of those things in particular. But yeah, that was just kind of the first thing I wanted to point out. But they performed a bunch of tests actually to conclude this, but just to the major ones of note were self-reported alcohol use and cravings, reported neuropsychological evaluation and testing for inflammatory markers and cortisol. And I say that because I don't know a single young person that would accurately report how much they're drinking, even for a study like this.
I generally have in the past. Well, maybe not in the age range actually of most of the participants of that study,
Right.
but I definitely do now. Partly just because it's amusing to see doctors' faces when you tell them.
Would you have participated in a study like this, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would have.
Mm,
The same reason as as I'm sort of interested in this today is just
yeah.
yeah, I might actually learn something, you know, or
Okay.
at least somebody might, you know.
Would you participate in something like this now then? Yeah.
Oh, definitely, aye.
Mm.
If nothing else, just to scare scientists with the count of units I can see.
Maybe we'll have to do a study on binge drinking in adults then, I guess. Well, but you still fit in this young person age range. You're 25, no?
Yeah, I thought it was 23 from my memory of the study, but
Maybe you know more than I do. I thought it was 24 or 25, but
I read it weeks ago. I've drank a lot since then.
that's okay. But just the general findings from this hypothesis anyway was that there was a correlation, which we'll get back to that word correlation because it bugs me, between the number of binge drinking episodes, increased cravings, and the simulation of certain inflammatory markers like IL-6 and IL-8. I mean, the actual names of them are less important than just the overall gist that binge drinking is correlated with emotional recognition difficulties, which is just being able to kind of look at somebody's face and tell, like, are they happy? Are they sad? And microbiome alterations are the alterations to the bacteria in your gut. And that there's actually a few species of bacteria that they think are associated with emotional processing and impulsivity, which I thought was kind of interesting.
That's I'm trying to remember if any of that sounds familiar to anything I've been told before, but I honestly don't know that it is.
I mean, and it's one of those things where, well, let me go back to correlation, I guess. Have you ever heard the term or the phrase, I guess, that correlation does not equal causation?
Oh, big fan of it.
Oh, yes, me too, honestly,
As
because
soon as you picked up on correlation, I was like, if you don't say that, I will.
it's so difficult, especially, just in relation to the gut-brain axis because there's so much that we don't know about it. It's really difficult to find papers that are actual studies on the gut-brain axis rather than just literary or systematic reviews in which they say, "Well, we have this group of people and they do this, and they've ended up with this bacteria, so the 2 things are correlated." And it doesn't, I mean, it means something, but it means that we have more work to do, and I think a lot of times it's really easy, I mean, especially just in relation to this paper in particular, I think it would be really easy for someone to take this paper and say, "Well, you have this gut bacteria because you binge drink," right? But in reality, it's just as easy to say, "You binge drink because of this gut bacteria," and there's no really way to differentiate the 2.
So, just to be clear on that, part of this you're saying is that the the result of this gut bacteria could actually be linked to issues of impulsivity leading to the binge drinking.
Right, that's what they were saying is in the correlation between the number of binge drinking episodes and increases in these inflammatory molecules and also core recognition and impulsivity control. Like they think all of these things are kind of correlated somehow. But my problem is with just those results are so easily misinterpreted, I feel. And it was actually funny. I had a lecture the other day from Dr. Kevin Odell, and he was telling us about a bit of research that he did a while ago, where he took fruit flies and he received a bit of funding to determine how the flies knew what sex they were because they're able to exhibit sex specific behaviors, but they wanted to look into the neurogenetics of how do they know what sex they are. This research got picked up in an article by The Sun, which was titled, this is not verbatim, I cannot remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of researcher wins £270,000 grant to figure out why female fruit flies like sex. And that was the name of the article that got published. Error riddled, the entire thing. And as soon as I saw that, that was just what I thought of because I just think that just so many of these papers are just so easy to misinterpret. And then on the other hand, I think that there was kind of a number of factors that they couldn't really consider because I mean, how many of these young people had a drunk cigarette?
Well, that's the thing as well, because that's supposed to have a correlation to inflammation as well. So
Yeah.
I've been told.
Yeah.
So that's so I understand why that was an exclusion criteria, even if it does limit
Mm,
the number of the number of candidates.
yeah.
But it's also not something you can totally write off as not having happened, especially when all of this is or mostly is self-reported, you know.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, I was thinking as well, like a family history of alcoholism. I mean, how many of these participants have a family history of alcoholism that they don't even know about, and have put themselves in the study anyway, which is a good thing. But at the same time, how many can we? Is there things we can't account for? I mean, factors like people's stress. Stress also causes inflammation. Physical activity can reduce inflammation. I mean, socioeconomic status has been shown to increase mortality. I mean, you have all these things that just haven't really been considered. And then my big one was, I mean, you're gonna say that young people binge drinking have impaired ability to recognize emotions. Is that because they binge drink, or is it because they spend a considerable amount of time in pubs?
Well, that's the other thing is, I have trouble recognizing people's emotions when I'm steaming. I don't know if how related that is to
Do you
to,
think
to,
they
my,
came
to
in
my
to
gut
give their
flora.
their self-reported analysis still steaming from the day before?
Had I been involved in that study, I definitely would have.
So then I guess if you had read this study as a younger person than you are now, not that you're not still young and springy, would you think it would have any effect on your drinking habits?
I'm not totally sure if it would because I don't feel like there's been a definite enough conclusion drawn for me to change my lifestyle based on it.
Right.
In terms of what I do from a point of view of having an inflammatory condition and what I do relating to my drinking, I've got much stronger, more definite motivations I could point to. That this study I don't know really has told me enough of anything. Even
Mm.
with you explaining the conclusions of it, I don't know has really given me
Enough to go off of.
a clear reason to change very much.
Yeah. I mean, I don't personally binge drink, but if I did, I think I'd be in the boat of not really on this boat, I guess is I guess is what I was looking for. But yeah, I don't know. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say, I guess, in regards to this paper in particular?
Uh, with regards to that paper, not as such. As I say, it does feel like it's sort of slightly vague, and it does point more to correlations than to anything else. It doesn't.
Mhm.
I, from my point of view, I don't really. I've not really gotten much of anything from it.
Right.
You know.
See if they were to do some sort of follow-up study on this then I guess, just as, like, a member of the general public, what how specific do you think they'd have to get? What kind of tests would they need to do for you to be willing to say, "Okay, that's definitive. I would change my drinking habits according to what these lovely scientists have told me."
Well, I think in this area, if they could sort of show more of a definite link in terms of either but basically kind of which way round the thing this works, or if it is all completely connected, that drinking is influenced by your impulsivity that leads you to binge drink is influenced by the bacteria present, or whether this is present as a result of your binge drinking. Is it as could be it's sort of inferred from it a sort of a cycle you're sort of putting yourself into, or is it is one the result of the other?
Hmm,
'Cause as it is just now, if creating, I'm causing myself to be more impulsive by drinking more. Well, by drinking more, I'm sort of doing that anyway. Just
right.
it's just a question of scale,
Yeah,
But if there's an actual, I don't know. So if it's somehow I ended up in a loop of just sort of progressing myself just into being more impulsive to drink more, to be more impulsive to drink.
right.
If there is more of a definite link as well to is it increasing inflammation for me at all? I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to in my experience, but
Yeah, and that was kinda just what tied into what I was talking about earlier with a lot of these gut-brain axis studies. It's a very chicken and egg situation. Like, was it the binge drinking that gave you the bacteria, or were you already born with the bacteria? Like, was it something you were already inclined to do and you just didn't even know it, or have you kind of put it on yourself? And I think that really opens up for a lot of people feeling quite guilty, especially now because we're in a time where there's a lot of misinformation. It's spread very, very easily, and I think it's really easy for people to kind of see these studies and think that they've done something drastic by changing the biome that they have in their gut, when in reality, I mean, it may have been what you were just born with and a matter of genetics rather than behavior.
Well, that I suspect is probably why they've excluded people with a family history of
Mm,
alcoholism, because I know that there has been sort of studies over the last however long to suggest that there is some sort of genetic component
mm,
in both in alcoholism and in other sort of substance addictions.
mhm,
There could be some sort of genetic link, but again, it's one of these things where there is a correlation. There's not a definite thing. So that would be something else if there was to be more research done to that area, is to see whether there is,
mhm.
a sort of genetic predisposition that some people might have, and this could be one of any number of possible causes for that.
Right. And I mean, I don't know if you've maybe been told about this. I wasn't able to find any literature on this specifically, but is there any kind of correlation between alcohol and substance use and individuals with inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's?
Well, this is a slightly strange thing. Is I have been told sort of very mildly by doctors in the past that it's something that can sort of increase inflammation. It could cause a worsening of symptoms.
Mm,
But I've not really been told that very consistently or very strongly.
mm,
In my own experience of kind of drinking a fair amount before my diagnosis, and sort of it had sort of steadily increased over a period of time and is now sort of steadily decreasing. I've not really found there to be much of a correlation at all. But I'm also the only times I've been sober enough for long enough to notice a change has been where I've stopped drinking, going from drinking a very large amount regularly to nothing at all for a period of days,
mm,
which is just quite a big change to my diet anyway, which
right.
is, it was the same as I used to be vegetarian, and when I started eating meat again, it made quite a big difference to my symptoms, just with I think just because it's a change in my diet.
Yeah.
So that's the only connection I can really point to in my experience uh, with drinking. I think if I were to do, for there not be a sudden change and to be able to do a couple of days at a time, sort of regularly, I maybe could tell you more, but in my experience, it doesn't really seem to do very much.
Well, then I guess seeing as you are the expert on personal experience with Crohn's disease, what actually is Crohn's disease? Because I didn't look this up for this reason because I wanted to get your
You'll get,
non-scientific description of the condition
oh, fantastic.
or scientific, either way. Go for it.
I don't know if I can give you a scientific description of it. I can give you what I've been told by doctors and what my personal experience of symptoms is.
Okay, shoot.
So my memory of what doctors have told me it is that the lining of my intestine is sort of permanently inflamed in a way that it might be for the likes of people with a like irritable bowel syndrome.
Mm,
It might become inflamed in response to certain sort of stimulus. Mine's more sort of consistently inflamed, but it can become more or less depending on how stupid I'm willing to be with it. Uh, the there's a whole big sort of list of symptoms I was told of by a doctor at some point that would that are caused by it, but some of them the likes of like sort of brain fog and these well, brain fog's the perfect example. I've got another completely unrelated condition that quite often causes that for me.
mm.
So I don't know
So these
which
are
one it
so
is at a
a
time.
doctor told you that it could cause brain fog, Crohn's
Yeah,
disease. Oh, and that's interesting.
that
Okay.
was that was my GP. I think weirdly told me that.
Hmm.
Of all people, but it was.
Would you rather someone else had told you that?
I wouldn't have minded hearing it from a specialist. No,
Oh
but
yeah, actually, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
no, I mean, if a man at a bus stop had told me that wouldn't matter at all.
Right.
But
Yeah.
no, it was my GP mentioned that, but then like I say that overlaps. But the big, no, the main symptom of it for me anyway is the sort of the cramps and spasms,
Yeah.
sort of the pain and or discomfort that can cause me. There's days where I see if I might be sitting here now the idea of standing up isn't really an option for a while
Mm,
because that'll just you
yeah,
know moving could be an issue,
yeah,
you know, or you know like there's times where I'll sit and not drink a liquid for a number of hours because it's to sort of increase the level of constipation for myself essentially, or just simply because water, you know, even drinking water is going to somehow upset things. But no, it's really all to do with stomach cramps and bowel movements in terms of what I perceive as the symptoms of it, because I can't totally separate all the other symptoms
right.
from just sort of the rest of my life.
So, do you ever read any papers or articles about Crohn's, or is this mainly just what you've been kind of told by your doctors and your personal experience, I guess?
I've read some in
Mm,
terms of reading more in terms of reading things about the management of symptoms to try and see if you know how much of what I've been told by doctors is what I'll find, and if there's something
right.
else that you know that might make a difference that I've not thought of. Like before it was mentioned to me by a doctor, I read a couple of articles suggesting a link between stress and a worsening of symptoms, which
Yeah.
is how I was first introduced to the idea of meditation for it,
Mm.
which has resulted in me being very good at meditation and having no particular difference in my symptoms.
Well, I'm horrible at meditation if that makes you feel any better. But I guess just kind of on that topic, I also saw a number of studies that were linking Crohn's disease to people having feelings of anxiety or depression. It just made me think. I mean, there's no pressure to kind of share if you experience any of these things personally, but do you think that it's a matter of the gut brain axis and that whole system kind of communicating bidirectionally, or do you think it's more just the symptoms and the effect on your daily life have implications for your mental health?
Well, that's kind of an interesting thing because you know I have sort of thought about that before. You know, like, like with before, it's a sort of chicken and egg
Mm,
conversation that you know is the fact that you know is my depression making it worse, or
mm,
am I more depressed because I've
right.
got a sort of fairly miserable life at times because of this condition? You know,
I was gonna say not being able to drink anything or stand up, yeah, that would probably have some pretty
yeah,
significant implications for your quality of life.
it's one of the only things in my life that really causes me much in the way of stress either. Because there's
Mm,
times you know where you know you're just going to be on a bus for the next hour and a half.
right.
That's exciting at times, you know.
Yeah.
But
And I mean, yeah.
so I don't know necessarily. I know in the more stressed I am about something, the worse it can be. But as I say, generally a moment where I'd stress about it would be in already kind of a moment of urgency. So I'm sure it probably does make it worse, but it's also the main cause of anxiety in my life, you know.
Yeah.
So the connection there is quite hard for me to make,
Mm,
really. But you know, in terms of if there is one or how much of one there might be, you know.
yeah. And I mean, I guess just in relation to when we start talking about this related study, I know you'd mentioned kind of struggling with your GPs in general. Is this kind of more in relation to getting them to understand your symptoms, or is this more in getting treatments for it?
I kind of a mix of both, actually. I I did at one point have a very good GP, which is actually where I've got most of the
Mm,
vast majority of my information actually has come from the GP I first spoke to about all this when I was 15 or 16.
mm,
I since moving away from that area, I've seen various other doctors at various points, and I've kind of repeated all the same tests that I did when I was 15, got told nothing more. And on a couple of occasions been referred to a GI specialist to get a colonoscopy.
mm.
The results have never really been made very clear to me of them.
Yeah.
Or to be honest, the reasons for them have never been made very clear to me either. I was sort of told it was it was a further test to let us see. So I think one of them they were looking for sort of a structural issue that I never heard anything more about, so I'm guessing wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the other was it was some sort of it was some sort of other way of testing for inflammatory markers, I think was what they'd said to me.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if I ever found out the results of that actually.
Well, I actually might be able to clear up a very, very small part of what I imagine they were looking for in those tests with this study, just from what I found about this. So this was a study that was published quite recently, actually in 2024, and they aim to investigate the correlation of the choroid plexus volume and permeability with inflammatory biomarkers in Crohn's disease, which that's a lot. But the choroid plexus is basically kind of this system of vessels that connect the ventricles in your brain, which are actually empty spaces in your brain that are full of fluid. And the choroid plexus produces your cerebrospinal fluid that goes through your brain and through your spine, and it makes up the blood-brain barrier. So a lot of scientists actually think that the choroid plexus plays a really big part in this communication of the gut-brain axis because it's one of those fluids that can travel so easily in between your guts and your brain, basically. But this study comprised of only 17 individuals, so that's important to note as well. And they used MRI imaging to view the size of the choroid plexus, and they found that the volume of the choroid plexus in the brain actually decreases with the increasing values of C-reactive protein and fecal calprotein. And C-reactive protein is just a sign in the blood of systemic inflammation, whereas fecal calprotein is a sign of intestinal inflammation. So it was likely that when they were doing those tests, they were looking for fecal calprotein because that's often quite high in individuals with inflammatory bowel disease. But yeah, what do you make of these, I guess?
Of those tests or of that study specifically?
Just any of it, I guess. I'm happy to kind of
I know,
cover things over again either.
I don't know that I've got a tremendous amount more to say about giving a stool sample of him that's fairly unpleasant.
Yeah.
But as a in terms of that's the study that I read start of and very quickly realised I did not understand it well enough.
Yeah.
And to be honest, from where I understand it better now. I still don't really grasp it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and
What?
that was my interpretation of it as well, especially when I was getting to the conclusion of it, which is the important part, because that's when they talk about kind of limitations of the study as well, which I wanted to cover. But it's just riddled with abbreviations, which I really don't like because as much as it saves whoever's writing this paper a very small amount of time, it just really creates this barrier for people that don't know the abbreviations. And I mean, I study this topic and I didn't know the abbreviations. It was about every 2 minutes or so, I was scrolling back to the top of the page where they have this bank of about 100 abbreviations that you need to flip through alphabetically to find, oh, that's what it is, and then scroll back down to the bottom of the paper just to be able to read another sentence and then repeat. So yeah, I mean, I really don't blame you for not getting it off the bat because I know I certainly didn't. But just in regards to the conclusion, they were really quick to discuss their limitations. It was quite close to the beginning of the conclusion of the paper, which I think was really quite good because you can't really hide the fact that you only had 17 people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that familiar with medical studies, but that feels very,
Yeah,
for something that's not a particularly rare
yeah.
condition to point to, 17 is an incredibly small sample size, isn't it?
And I could one up you on that because it actually said in the paper as well that 2 of the individuals that they did MRI scanning of, there was too much artifacts, they couldn't read them. So they
It's
actually
actually
only
15.
got results from 15 of them, yeah, which I thought was ideal for posting a conclusive study.
That doesn't really feel like you can make much of unless they've got a very clear, unless it was exactly the same response from all 15 people.
Yeah.
Surely they can't really draw much of a conclusion at all.
Well, there's something and I did this in my literary review recently because studies like this are still important because they're used as proof of concept or proof of principle. Sometimes they're called studies where it's just you can't make a direct conclusion. You can't, go and change anybody's healthcare based on the results of the study, but you can take a hypothesis and say, well, I think this is true. And what it does is it kind of opens up a channel for for other scientists to recreate the study, though, especially medical researchers that have these cohorts of patients they're already working with that would be willing to kind of give other researchers access to their medical information. So it's important for things like that. But it just brings you back to kind of the danger of the spread of misinformation, which is why I think it was good that they really talked about their limitations, but I guess just specifically for the choroid plexus, because originally when I saw that it decreased in size, that actually meant nothing to me because I don't really know why that would be important. But they found that the inflammatory changes also changed the permeability of the vessels in the brain. And when you think about the fact that the choroid plexus is responsible for making up the blood-brain barrier, you know what the blood-brain barrier is, yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, generally.
Generally, it prevents things like drugs and inflammatory markers and dangerous kind of pathogenic molecules as well, so viruses and that for being able to get access to your brain. So what they think is that these inflammatory changes, which can come from your gut, are actually altering the permeability of the choroid plexus, which means that inflammatory molecules could potentially enter the brain, which I I mean, I don't think really needs much of an introduction besides the fact that that just sounds bad.
Yeah, I don't know what it means, but inflammation generally isn't a good thing, is it? You
That
know?
yeah, that seems to be the general consensus is just yeah, it's just a bad thing. But this was really good as well because specifically the permeability of this was actually a study that was done to mimic a study that was done in mice. So while this study shows that there's a correlation between inflammation and permeability in the brain with these mice models, these mouse models, they actually caused them to have inflammation. They forced them to have this inflammation and controlled all these outside variables. So they were able to prove that inflammation causes this change in permeability, at least in mice anyway. So I thought that was nice that they kind of did that in conjunction because I think it makes me at least more confident in the results of that.
But I knowing that I feel like there's a lot they can have a lot more authority talking about it than than before. But obviously a study on mice uh,
Yeah,
isn't going to be the same as a study on humans. But at
right.
least it gives a
Yeah,
it gives a better idea of the relationship that there is actually something there that for them to look at.
yeah. Yeah, no, and I just like that as well, that it was really I mean, that's one of the nice things about those models is that, I mean, if you can keep your test subject in a box, you can actually control just about every variable that there is, so, yeah, that's
You're not
ideal.
allowed to do that with human subjects anymore, are you?
No, you also can't force them to have inflammation, unfortunately, although that would be nice. Um,
Well, be nice for the researcher,
yeah.
you know.
Which that leads me to my, next question, would you be willing to participate in a study like this? Say we weren't gonna keep you in a box.
Yeah, well, if we move on from the hypothetical, and so I think sort of it'll be about sort of 8 decades out of date research methods we've just discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I'd participate in that study purely just because I enjoy MRIs, which I'm aware
Oh,
is strange.
isn't that cheeky? Yeah, wow. Why do you like an MRI?
There's just something about it I find quite amusing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because there's a every time I've had an MRI, they've insisted on playing music during the MRI.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've
So
seen that.
you sort of got this experience of being sat in a coffin with a jackhammer and Bob Marley,
Yeah.
and it's a really odd experience, you know. I just is the whole thing about it's just so surreal, you know. I kind of I've had I don't know 4 or 5 I think now.
Yeah.
I've genuinely enjoyed every single one of them just 'cause I find the whole thing hilarious.
To be fair, when I was younger, I actually had to get a number of them as well, and, one of the first times I did it, I quite liked the wee hammer. It had a nice groove to it, and I actually I guess I didn't really think that the person taking it was gonna notice, but I did start dancing, just slightly, and I very swiftly got a notification over the wee headset I was wearing that I had to stop moving, and then from then on, they actually, put on Finding Nemo for me, so I watched Finding Nemo. I don't know if you've
I
had that
thought they could.
experience.
I've never known they could show you something that, but
It's kinda interesting actually, they put, like, this big helmet over you that's got a mirror in it, so
aye.
you're not looking, like, directly into you're looking into a mirror that's pointing down towards your feet, so the television was down by my feet, and even though I was looking upwards, I was seeing what was down there.
No, I've never seen that done. If I'd had such a thing, I'd have been looking through the window into like I don't know, the control booth or whatever you
Yeah,
call it.
right?
I'd just been sat there staring at them, which would have made I think would
Yeah.
have made everyone uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine it was also because it was a children's hospital, unfortunately, once you become an adult, the MRIs and things just become much less fun.
Well, they could still just like show you Die Hard or something. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, Die Hard, that'd be
you
great,
know,
yeah.
like to be fair, in an MRI, we might be able to tell if it was a gunshot or just the machine gun. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah. Wow, actually, we should get on this. This is a business model waiting to happen. So then I guess just because we talked about the mice and everything, just to bring us back into this, but, do you think you'd be more willing to trust the findings of the study than the study on binge drinking?
I, in some ways, definitely I would be just because I feel like that there's much more of an actual conclusion that's come from it.
Mm,
It's not it doesn't point at from my understanding, it doesn't point at anything very definite that I can do anything with,
mm,
but it does feel like a much more sort of solid piece of research in that it's led to sort of a bit more of a definite answer rather than a correlation.
mm,
And they can say that they've observed this effect in admittedly only 15 people, but in 15 people,
mm.
they've observed something they know a definite answer to what's happened rather than a sort of a bit of a vagary, which is seemed to be sort of the conclusion of the last one.
Yeah. And I mean, in this paper as well, they mentioned that there was actually changes to the volume of the choroid plexus and other diseases as well, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And I think that's interesting that they mention that, but I would maybe worry about including studies like that in kind of the introduction or the conclusion of this paper because I think it just leads for more space for misinterpretation. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that they should kind of be left in there?
Well, that to me sort of it's definitely it's made me now want to read whatever the related study would be
Mm,
into the likes of Parkinson's, but I don't know how briefly it's introduced, but if it's introduced kind of the way that you've got it there, it really just kind of makes me like confused it's been why it's been included. It doesn't sound particularly relevant other than it's another way that they've observed this
yeah.
the same effect.
My thinking would be, I mean, at least because I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so my thinking would be if I read this paper and had no formal knowledge of the subject, I would think, well, I have Crohn's disease and it's shrinking my brain, and now I'm gonna get Parkinson's. That was like,
I'll be honest with you, that thought has come to me in the last 5 minutes.
well, actually, it has the exact opposite effect. They found in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that your cord plexus actually is larger. So fear not. I mean,
Also,
I can't make any.
so I'm now immune is what you're saying legally as a doctor.
It seems like there's a hole in the research there, so maybe we should look into that, yeah. I don't know, would you find that you have really good memory?
Strangely, yes,
Wow.
for the amount that I drink, yeah, I've got a remarkable memory.
I think I need to get writing some emails on that actually, maybe they can add that into their next study then on this.
I thought we were going to email them to see if you could have an inflamed bowel. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I don't think they're handing those out. That would be interesting. And then for this one as well, because I went through the selection criteria for both of the studies for this one, the only selection criteria I could find is that the participants had to have a confirmed diagnosis of Crohn's disease, and they had to be between the ages of 18 and 70. I don't really know much about Crohn's in particular, but would you like what would you say are some factors they haven't really considered as somebody with Crohn's going into the study?
From the point in my life that I'm at now, I would say that's sort of reasonable because it's something that doesn't for most people develop until they're sort of like late teenage or early 20s.
Mm,
So by getting people that are 18 and they've got a confirmed diagnosis, they should be sort of at the point where their body's developed enough. I remember it maybe wasn't less severe, but it was definitely different when I
mm,
was sort of 15 or 16 than it was by the time I was 18 or 19. I couldn't really tell you now what it was, but it definitely did change a wee bit somehow for me. So I'd say that's probably a good age to start it, but having such a broad range of ages, surely there must be an effective by the time that by the time that you're 70, there's all sorts of things are are the processes in your body are slowing down or changing or
right,
whatever. So surely there must be some impact to that,
right. Yeah.
But if it hasn't, if it if it hasn't affected the results, I suppose you know.
I mean, and I guess, like, especially since they're talking about the fact that they've discovered these changes to the choroid plexus in people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and that the rates of that, I mean, obviously they go up a ton as you kind of age. I think that is kind of interesting that they were willing to accept participants up until the age of 70, but
Well, that's another factor actually. So by
yeah.
70, you're in the sort of like not quite early onset range for
Mm,
those kinds of conditions, but
yeah.
look, you could well have Parkinson's and be
Yeah.
just not noticeably diagnosed yet.
Yeah. I mean, early onset for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's can be as young as 50 years old.
Aye.
So, yeah, I think it is really quite interesting that they had it quite so broad, but I think the overarching idea for this paper was that it really was a proof of principle study and that they kind of they wanted to do more. They mentioned that in their limitations that they really wanted to kind of widen the study. So, I mean, if you are interested in participating, you should maybe reach out to them. Maybe they'll
Oh
be
yeah,
recruiting
but
again. I guess just as well because I was kind of curious because you mentioned this. Do you feel like you had quite a large lifestyle change from before when you were about 17, 18 until later when the symptoms arose?
oh yeah, massive.
Yeah.
I so I've had to kind of completely change my diet
Mm,
from what it was when I was younger. And I'm also I'm in a much worse state of fitness
mm,
because there's a lot of a lot of exercises aren't really available to me
Right.
now, and sort of exercise in general is kind of ill-advised a lot of the time.
Mhm.
It's made fairly big a fairly big difference. At the time, I was I'd kind of I you know where I used to compete nationally as a runner. I'd kind of slowed down on that around that time anyway because of a damage to one of my knees.
Oh, okay.
But I definitely would have stopped either way purely because it's just not that kind of training just isn't viable for me anymore.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
as well as apart from it, I had to stop eating a vegetarian diet as well. It just so happened that just quite a number of the things that I was eating in bulk were just not sustainable for me.
So do you think it was more the condition that changed your life and not your life changing kind of the condition?
Yeah, I've had to adjust a lot of things to live more comfortably.
Yeah. So then I guess like on the topic of psychosocial changes at least, I mean, do you notice then changes in like your mood or behavior when you're kind of having, I guess, a flare up? I think I saw is what it was called.
Yeah, well, during a flare up, it's much more likely to be during a sort of a depressive phase for me. That goes back to what we were saying about it earlier. Is it that that's somehow is influencing it and sort of to accidentally make a pun I can't figure out how to get round, inflaming the condition,
Mm,
or is it purely just I'm more likely to be more depressed because
mm.
you know the number of hours you spend in a bathroom in the day really does influence your quality of life.
Sorry, that's not funny.
But it kind of is quite funny. I said it like that on purpose, but the likes of that, or being in quite a lot of pain, or struggling to sleep, and these sorts of things will
Right.
surely will make you more depressed. If they don't, my God, you're enjoying your life too much.
So then I guess just from what you've heard today on these topics, would you be more willing now than to have a look at kind of scientific research articles or just anything in general relating to
I think it actually, yeah, is the one of the overarching themes of my difficult relationship with medical professionals is that I've always been given very little information about anything that wasn't a physical injury.
Mm,
But I also get told very regularly that there isn't, that there hasn't been research done on this, or, well, we don't know about that, or that there just isn't enough research being done in this area, or these sorts of things. Well, from what you've told me today, there's actually a fair bit of research being done. It's just not, I don't
yeah.
know on what level obviously there has to be a gap between a scientist doing a study and writing a paper and influencing treatment or what a doctor might tell you. But there's some things where definitely if I was to look more into it and read more of the research before it's reached the point of being communicated by doctors, I might well, end up, knowing something that I can use to improve the quality of my life a wee bit.
And that's actually where a lot of these studies kind of die is in the translational capacity of them because I mean obviously this is such a small sample size for the study in particular it would have to be repeated a couple of times at least before you'd really find a body of funding for it because that's kind of a really big issue for a lot of these studies is that there isn't the right funding available for things in particular, especially conditions that are considered more rare. It's really difficult to find people that are willing to donate money to them or really spend a lot of time and effort on them, which is unfortunate because as much as the condition's rare, I mean, there's still people that have it everywhere.
Oh, I know, but they're not. I don't know that inflammatory conditions are that uncommon either.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I know what would it be? And over my life, I've probably worked with or known, I'd say another 4 or 5 people with Crohn's
Mm,
and three with ulcerative colitis, which is
mhm.
a very kind of similar condition. I don't know it's that particularly rare,
Mhm.
but it's as well as there does seem to be quite a bit of money in manufacturing the medicines that don't really help a huge amount.
Yeah.
You know, but there's less money in doing more research and helping people than there is in not really helping them for quite a lot more.
Mhm.
Just to put in a wee conspiracy angle, since that's what podcasts are really about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I mean, if you've got anything else on the medication, that's not an area I'm really I know a lot about, I guess.
No, I've got quite a lot about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, but that's not really the setting.
No, we're not here to talk about Andy, unfortunately. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Care. This was a really constructive conversation, and I appreciate you sharing so much with me about your personal experience. I think we should maybe find a couple of studies for you to join.
Well, I'm honestly always happy for an MRI, if the option's available. And
Well,
I do enjoy discussing my bowel movements with unsuspecting people.
well, aren't I lucky? Make sure you guys all go ahead and join us next week for a discussion on some recent epilepsy research. So I'm really looking forward to that.